You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 250 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. Today, we're in Worcestershire, meeting a farmer who many of you, I'm sure, will already know in some way. Jake Freestone is with me. Jake is the farm manager at Overbury Farms on the Gloucestershire-Worcestershire border, where he's been since 2003, and he's also a director of the Green Farm Collective. He was Farmers Weekly's Environmental Champion in 2021, the 2021 Arable Innovator of the Year at the British Farming Awards, and the Farm Carbon Toolkit 2020 Soil Farmer of the Year. He was also awarded the inaugural Caroline Drummond Innovation and Communication Award in 2023, and he's a Nuffield Scholar, for which his Nuffield Scholarship title was Breaking the Wheat Yield Plateau in the UK. And even though that was a while ago, we'll definitely talk about that today. Overbury Farms is made up of 1,600 hectares of mixed enterprises, including arable and sheep, and Jake puts soil at the centre of his management. The farm follows regenerative farming principles, including no-till cover cropping, a diverse rotation, and integration of livestock. He studied agriculture at the University of Plymouth, and he sits on the National Crops Board of the NFU. Jake, welcome to Meet the Farmers. I said before we started recording, I've wanted to have you on for ages, so it's good to finally have you on.
Ben, thank you so much. It's a really kind invitation, and really looking forward to our conversation here today.
Well, real pleasure. So I've given a bit of an introduction to Overbury, but I wonder if you could put it in your words in terms of the business, the enterprises, how the business works.
Yeah, will do. Thank you. It's an exciting business, actually, Overbury Enterprises. It's been in the same family ownership since 1723, and Penelope Bossum, who is the generation in control at the moment. Penelope's the 8th generation. So we are an estate and farming business steeped in history, but actually looking for using the very latest technology in terms of how we manage the building and the environment, or the building, the business, the environment, the farmland, and the buildings that we have. So it is quite dynamic. It's quite diverse. Not only is there a farming operation here, which I look after, there's some property as well, both residential and commercial. There are some business lets and community spaces. There's a shoot on the farm. We have a forestry department. Also got a nursery school called Overbury Grasshoppers. And they spend a lot of time out on the farm, which is great. Getting them indoctored at a young age into farming and countryside and seeing them outdoors. It's fantastic. So there's a really big team involved in looking after Overbury. And yeah, the farming side, which is my responsibility, we're about 1,600 hectares here. We do a bit of contracting for a neighbour on an organised contract farming agreement. And then we also do some sort of ad hoc contracting for some of our local farming neighbours, which is great. It's a mixed farm, both in terms of topography. We range from 1,000 feet above sea level on the top of Breedon Hill, where we have Cotswold brash soil, so very thin, some quite large sort of slabs of limestone, about 6 to 8 to maybe 10 inches of soil if we're lucky up there. And then we come down the southern slopes of Breedon Hill over onto a period of an area of sort of sand over gravel. And then we've got some Evesham series clay down towards the A46. Those of you that know that, we're just off junction 9 on the M5. So real mixed farm in terms of soil type, but also in terms of cropping, land use as well. So we're combining here about, depends on rotation, about 850 to 900 hectares a year. And then we have some rotational grass, some of it in stewardship, some of it now in SFI. And then we have an area of permanent pasture as well. We've got just over 300 hectares of permanent pasture. And we've got a flock of just over 1,000 ewes lambing outdoors. And they are looked after by two brilliant contract shepherds, Sam and Shirley, SAS Contracting. And a mixture of North Country mules and sort of white-faced Romney Clins. We've also got some wool shedding sheep as well. We bought a flock of a mixed age flock a couple of years ago, and we're just sort of experimenting and seeing how those sort of fit into the system. Yeah. So lots of arable, lots of grass. Let a little bit of land out for vegetables. We have some irrigation licenses, parcels of woodland. Yeah, a grain store operation here. We put a new grain store up in 2016. So we contract store not just for the contract farm, but also some of our neighbours as well. We have some storage here for some of their crops as well. Some of those are organic stores as well, actually. So yeah, there's quite a lot going on.
Yeah, you could say that. Wow, what an overview. I don't think I need to ask any more questions. I think that's everything there. But but with that, definitely comes, you need good people, and you've got a core team. And I'm guessing, the size of the team over time, and I'm talking a good deal of time here, has gone down over time. But the team that you have, a lot of businesses struggle to find good people. Today, we all know that it's a tough time in the labour market for employers. So, I mean, it sounds like a fantastic place to work, and there's a lot going on. But how do you ensure that you A, get good people, and B, keep them?
It's a real challenge, actually. I'm really lucky here. So we're a team of 5 full-time staff, 3 of which have been here for over 40 years in terms of their service, and their fathers were here before them. So Overbury is very much in the blood of that generation, hugely experienced, but, getting to a stage in their careers where, retirement is sort of upon the horizon in one form or another. And we need to look to the future, to how we can encourage, as you say, the next generation to find their feet here at Overbury. We made a bit of a start with that. We've got a young lad, Will, who started with us last September, who's settling in really well, learning the ropes and finding his feet around the place. And then for the last 4 years, we've also had a Hartbury sort of sandwich year student as well. Hartbury College University College is about half an hour away from us here. And we're very convinced that in order to encourage the next generation, you need to invest in them. You need to give them an opportunity and a chance to get involved. And on an estate and farm business like this that uses a lot of cutting edge technology, has good sound agricultural practices. We're members of Leaf Linking Environment and Farming. We do a lot of integrated farm management. So actually encouraging the next generation to have those sorts of philosophies and ideas introduced to them at a young age, I think, is really important. So we've had 4 brilliant students from there. Hopefully the next one, if he's listening, will be just as good. But time will tell. I'm sure he will. And that's been good. And actually the first one, Samantha, young lady, rang up, asking me whether we took sandwich students on, and if we did, could she come here? Not from a farming background at all, and she worked out brilliantly. And that reflected a lot in my sort of start of my agricultural career. My parents were teachers, so I didn't come from a family farm at all. So actually those are the sorts of people that I think can bring a huge amount of enthusiasm and open-mindedness to agriculture. So people like that I'm hugely kind of keen to promote and bring along and try and encourage in the right ways.
Let's maybe go on to your life growing up, because you said your parents were teachers. You grew up on the outskirts of Bristol, a part of the world that I love very much. But tell me about your life growing up, and where your interest in farming came from, I suppose.
Yeah, well, Mum and Dad were teachers out in Zambia, actually. I was born out there, came back here when I was about 3 months old, and then went back when my younger sister was born. So kind of settled in Bristol when I was about 7. Grew up in a suburb of Bristol, went to to school in the middle of Bristol, St Mary Redcliffe. My farming buzz, if you like, came from my godfather, Martin and Teresa Riley, who were up in Bedfordshire. And we used to have family holidays with them, weekends up there, milking Jersey cows, growing maize, the River Ouse at the bottom of the farm. And as a sort of 11, 12-year-old, to have a week in the summer holidays up there, sort of fishing and driving go-karts up and down the cow sheds and things like that I thought this was a really good way of life. I could get used to this. The reality isn't quite like that. But that's where I started. I got a job on a dairy farm just at Wick, just on the outsides of Bristol. Rob and Pam Wilmot, who were fantastic for me, in terms of giving me the encouragement and the opportunity to learn about cows and all the activities that go along with that, learning to drive tractors and silage making, hay making, all that kind of stuff. And really, I haven't ever wanted to do anything else in terms of my career. And the best opportunity really for me was to get into farm management. So worked out what the minimum A levels I needed to get into Seal Hayne Agricultural College. And that's what I did in 1991 to 1995. Degree in agriculture, honours degree there and there. Had a great time. I worked in Hampshire for my sandwich year, then went to work for the Duke of Buccleuch in Northamptonshire when I left there in 1995, which again was a mixed farm, arable sheep, dairy, beef, within a wider estate kind of infrastructure as well. And I had 4 brilliant years there. And then it was always a placement in terms of being trained up as an assistant to go into farm management. And an opportunity came with Velcourt down in Kent. So I went to work with them for a bit in Kent on the Cotswolds, actually not too far away from here at Miserdon Park Farms, just outside of Cirencester. And then finally at GH Bowser's over in Lincolnshire. So moved around a little bit, had a lot of experience growing very different crops that I was used to. So going from the Cotswolds to the fens near sort of Boston and Skegness, and double cropping cauliflower land and broccoli, vining peas, sugar beet, potatoes was a challenge, but really enjoyed that.
It seems like you were very dead set focused on that farm management career at quite from quite an early age, right the way through, focused on this is what I want to do. Was that the case? Because I mean, certainly today it seems like for young people going into the industry, yes, there is absolutely farm management as a career, but perhaps they're encouraged more to sort of perhaps look at share farming, perhaps look at other ways of getting into the industry. Were you dead set on farm management, or were you sort of open to other things as well?
No, that was what I wanted to do, was manage a farm, and I couldn't see a way at that time of being able to afford to have the capital to invest in machinery and livestock. Share farming is something I didn't really know about then, and actually, there were rented farms around. Rob and Pam's farm was a rented one, but it's something that I didn't really entertain farming in my own right. If I wanted to do this, it was hopefully going to be at scale. And the best way I thought at the time was to get into farm management, really.
Yeah, and similarly, you're now an arable farmer, but you started with cows. So, I mean, do you miss the cows? Do you miss working with cattle?
I do miss cows. I don't miss getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to milk cows, I'll be honest. I'm much more comfortable sitting on a combine at midnight than, that alarm clock at 4 o'clock to get out of bed. And I've got a huge respect to every dairy farmer that does that day in, day out. That's not something I could do. But I do miss working with cows. I think cows just bring a different relationship between farmer and beast that sheep do, much more personal. Really enjoyed working with sheep when I was in Hampshire. Worked with a great shepherd down there, Adrian. We had 1,800 North Country mules, and spent a lot of time with sheep there. And that was my first real sheep experience. Learned a lot there. But cattle is sort of where I started. Rob was milking 40 cows, so you got to know them all individually. I still remember Dawn, the last one that used to come into the parlour.
There's always one.
Every single time. There's always one. Yeah. And I know, some of the people on social media, Abby and JR from Strictly, they've got their favourite cows, the characters. And you do miss that personal interaction, I think, with cattle a bit more than sheep. Would never dismiss an enterprise here involving cattle of some description. So it's part of the regenerative process that I believe is the right thing to be doing for our soil and our business. I think cattle will have a role to play in that at some stage. They're brilliant for grass management. They're very tasty at the end of the day. And, in terms of carbon sequestration, what grassland is capable of doing if it's managed properly, then I think that has some huge benefits to wider society as well. So I think cattle is something that we wouldn't dismiss going into, shall we say.
Meet the Farmers is brought to you by Rural Pod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. Rural Pod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast, you're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk. Just bringing us back to when you started Overbury, do you remember sort of your application and that sort of early time? And did you ever envisage that you'd be at Overbury for so long?
Good question. It was advertised in the Farmers Weekly. I remember the process. I think there were about 80 applicants, series of 3 interviews. The second interview was kind of putting spreadsheets together and putting kind of business plans together and cash flowing things like that out, which, with my sort of Velcourt training was relatively straightforward for me to do. Did I envisage being here for so long? I don't know that I did, really. It's a job to know, but, I love working here. The people are fantastic. The team I have are great. The farm is it's a challenge, and it's it's never the same every year, and no farm ever is. But with the diversity of soil types and things that we have, there's a challenge every year, one way or another. Geographically, it's a beautiful part of the world, and again, we're not that far away from family and friends. So it works on so many different levels.
And over those 20 years, I suppose, I mean, how has the business changed over that time, and how have you changed over that time?
The business has changed significantly. I mean, when I first came here, everything was ploughed every year. We had a slightly bigger workforce at the time, and we moved quite quickly into sort of the first 5 or 6 years not doing so much ploughing, to work on more kind of a min-till scenario, really. And then we got to kind of 2010, 2011, we could see subsidies being removed. Grain prices were pretty low. So we were then thinking about how can we be more competitive, reduce our costs a little bit more, whilst not sacrificing sort of output. So we looked at quite a bigger stewardship scheme in 2011, taking some of our areas of production that weren't so profitable out and into stewardship options. A few years before that, we looked at guidance on tractors. So 2006, we retrofitted all steering modules to the tractors, went into variable rate applications to try and optimize our use of fertilizers, P's and K's, for instance. And yeah, that was the start, I think, of working towards AIM and Nuffield in 2013, which subsequently brought us into this regen kind of world. But we didn't know that was what it was at the time.
Yeah,
when we were looking at it, it was about economics, about how we can be more efficient, be more competitive, still building on the business that has been in Penelope's ownership for 300 years, or her family. But actually setting it up for the next 300 as well. And I think that's really an important thing to have a goal towards. Actually, we're not just farming for today; we are farming for, and that's been quite key to sort of the philosophy that we have. So that was about 2011. Really went in, bought a carrier, and we had a top down, and then really it started to change after Nuffield in quite a big way then.
Let's turn towards your Nuffield, and the title for this that you came up with was "Breaking the Wheat Yield Plateau" in the UK. So, why that topic? And did the topic change while you were doing your Nuffield? Because I know it does for some Nuffields. Or were you dead set on it from the beginning?
Yeah, so I got the inspiration for that when I was at cereals, and again going back to kind of plateauing yields in UK agriculture, not just on wheat. But I was at the Rothamsted sort of tent at cereals, and they had a 20 by 20 project running, 20 tons per hectare of wheat in 20 years' time, and that was a decade ago, and we haven't really moved forward.
No,
in 10 years.
I was going to say.
So, and it's quite frightening to say that was a decade ago, but it was. So we were seeing, the UK has been seeing that wheat, but not just wheat, has been stagnating in its yield. And if you put against that new technologies in plant breeding, in chemical husbandry, in precision farming elements, and you add all of those percentage gain increases as Steve Brailsford sort of marginal gain, we should be growing a lot more wheat per hectare than we actually are, and we're not. And you also then put into that equation the speed of change with our climate, and actually we will be struggling to maintain our current yields even more. So something had to change, something quite radical had to change. So my working title was 20 by 20 fact or fiction, and then sort of slightly moved it as I went through my Nuffield. And I thought I'd be heading off to go and find some silver bullets around the world about wheat technologies, but based around kind of my original thinking, I suppose. So looking at plant breeding in Saskatchewan, and there's some work done that 30% of the wheat yield is lost in the UK still to drought. So went to Oklahoma and some places, farming in the middle of the desert, and that's really where my soil health kind of light bulb went off, really. And actually, it is all about the soil. That if you can get that to work for you by primarily increasing organic matter, actually that's what it boils down to. You will be able to deal with water stresses and water challenges. So you'll be able to infiltrate when we have too much, be able to store it when we have too little. And actually other things then start to happen. And those other things that started to happen, I didn't really know 10, 12 years ago. Those are things that, as we've changed the system and as our soil have changed and as we've learned more about it, as we've spoken to more people who have been in the system for longer, more scientists who are involved in this, that then you start to look at what those changes enable your business to do going forward. And there's significant changes as well in terms of cost savings, in terms of capital investment in machinery, which we know are just frighteningly expensive. So all of those things, better environmental profile, reduce runoff, reduce risk of polluting our waterways from sediment and pesticide and fertilizer runoff from the farm, which at some stage farmers will be paying a bill for, the polluter pays scenario. So, yeah, if you do focus on the soil, which is what we've done, and the Regen Ag is the principles behind that soil management improvement, then all these other things start to come towards it.
So take us through those changes, I suppose, and with that new outlook that you had from your Nuffield, between finishing your Nuffield and today, how has that impacted on Overbury?
Yeah, so it's turned it on its head, literally. Although we don't turn things on their head anymore, which is sort of the basis of it, really. So we bought from New Zealand. We did some trials to start with. So 2013, 2014, we had Prime West, Paul Alexander, who's sadly no longer with us. He came down here with his cross slot drill to give us some demonstrations about how a disc drill would perform on the slabs of the Cotswold Hill and the clay at the bottom and the sand in the middle. Very, very happy with that, its performance, how those crops were growing. So we put an order in from New Zealand, from Crossslot, and August 2015, it appeared. So direct drilling was the way forward. That won't work on its own. You need to invest in the soil. You need to be growing cover crops. You need to be returning crop residue and improving your soil health, whatever that kind of means. People say you need a healthier soil, but actually, what is that? And to me, that's about sort of function, aeration. Does it smell nice? Is it crumbly? Are there lots of worms in it? That's basically it. And you don't get that from just direct drilling, as people found out in the 1970s, which I get challenged about a lot, about, it didn't work back then, why is it going to work now? Back then, it literally was just direct drilling. There weren't cover crops being grown. There weren't livestock grazing fields, particularly. Very often that organic matter, the straw and the residue, the stubble, all being burnt, which had its place occasionally, but not kind of year on year. So it is about, keeping our fields covered at all times, best we can. We don't achieve that all the time. Things go wrong. Late harvests, late drilling cover crops, they don't grow particularly well. This last year, we've had a bit of wheat failed where it's been really, really wet and the soil is then exposed to the
23-24 season.
2023-24 season, absolutely. Yeah. And I can go back to 2012, 2013. Another really, really wet autumn. We lost
lots of people are going back to that year at the moment.
Yeah, we lost quite a lot of wheat on our heavy land again, which was in full tillage then. And, so again, it's not necessarily the system, but what's interesting and what is, I think, going to be a wake-up call for a lot of farmers, because it is for me, this is definitely the right system to be doing in these years on these soils. But we're not doing it. We're not making gains fast enough to keep up with climate change. We've got the contract farm that is 4 or 5 years behind Overbury, and that hasn't fared quite as well as we have done here in this climate that we're in at the moment. So for me, we're on the right path. We're on the right route to make our business more resilient. That's what it has to be at the end of the day. But doing what we're doing, we're not doing it fast enough to keep up with the pace of change. Okay. And I think that's a challenge for me, but it's a bigger challenge for people that haven't entertained this particular journey, or have done, but are only a few years down the line. So, there are opportunities, but there are also challenges ahead. So we need to keep our fields covered. We need to graze them with graze the cover crops with sheep where we can, and a wider rotation. So with stewardship and now SFI, Sustainable Farming Incentive, we've got grass in the rotation as herbal lays. And I think that's, again, it's going back to mixed, sort of proper traditional mixed farming, which we haven't done here for quite a long time. The sheep were on the permanent pasture, and we grew some stubble turnips for them within the arable. Now we're grazing wheat in the winter, barley in the winter. We're grazing cover crops all through the winter. It means we're not housing the sheep, so we're saving money in terms of silage, haymaking, and disposing of plastic, and buying in ewe feed. So it's a whole sort of holistic approach to the whole business, really, not looking at these enterprises in isolation as well. So direct drilling, cover crops, rotation, livestock where we can, just getting organic matter, manure, biology back onto the fields. Yeah, and living roots in the soil, so capturing carbon and pushing it into the soil.
Yep. We have Groundswell is just around the corner, and that's what everyone is going to be going on about.
Yes, there will be a lot of all of those conversations going on, and what I love about Groundswell is the fact it's an open conversation. The farmers that are there are telling about their experiences, good and bad ones, and willing to share to help people not so far down that road, if you like, to catch up and to not make the mistakes that some of us early adopters probably did, to help speed it along a little bit.
Now, broadening this conversation out sort of away from Overbury, you are a director of the Green Farm Collective, and your co-director, Michael Kavanagh, he was actually on on the show some weeks ago. And I should also say, I mean, your other co-director, Tim Parton, who had a pretty terrible accident fairly recently. How's Tim doing?
Do you know what? Tim is incredible. If there were Olympic medals for positivity, Tim would need a gold one for that. So he's currently recovering at Oswestry and learning to sort of rebuild his physicality again. Obviously, a huge change in his and Jill and Mackenzie's lives, but Tim has been incredibly positive about a pretty catastrophic injury or series of injuries that he's had. And he's since he's been at Oswestry, things have got a lot better. He's a couple of weeks there now, starting to get back on social media, taking over running the business, and starting to come back to being the old Tim Parton that everybody loves and appreciates and admires for what he does. So it's great that he's moving the right way.
That's really good. That's really, really good to hear. And I should also just say, the GoFundMe Tim Parton Rehabilitation Fund is still open. So listeners, please do head to that if you'd like to give anything towards that. But yeah, Green Farm Collective generally, tell us a little bit more about it again for anyone who hasn't listened to that episode with Michael. Tell us what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so Green Farm Collective is a group of 4 of us, all Soil Farmer of the Year sort of finalists, really, all with a passion for regenerative agriculture and also a passion for the food that we grow, and also trying to get the value that food can generate back to the farm. And I think the danger is with a lot of these things is that the value that gets lost within the supply chain and ends up in the supermarkets' pockets rather than the farmer who starts the whole process and takes the risk. So we have a few things going on. Regeneratively farmed wheat is something that we're working quite strongly with at the moment. We have an independently audited farm assurance to satisfy the purchasers that what we are growing and delivering is certified to our own Green Farm Collective standards, which are available on the website. So regeneratively wheat is one. We are just about, I believe, next week going to be moving the first wheat from a farm into the mill.
Wow.
And that is hugely exciting. Taken us 12 months to probably get to that stage, to get the assurance system in place that is audited by FIA up in Scotland, and then also to line up, millers and the consumer at the end of the day to get that whole process done. So watch this space. There will be quite a lot of comms coming out of the Green Farm Collective when that starts to happen. So regenerative farm produce is one. We're starting with wheat. That's the biggest acreage that we all look after, but that will go into oats and barley relatively shortly. Then we are also looking at carbon and biodiversity as well. And the carbon market is a very, very cluttered one. That's where we started. We do all of our carbon auditing with Trinity AgTech and their Sandy platform, which has the highest authority in terms of the ISO standards. So we're happy that what we're auditing is good and correct and accurate. And the biodiversity is something that we are also offering, although, to be honest, we've been working really hard on the regenerative wheat supply chain. That the other 2 elements of the business are slightly lagging behind at the moment. We also have a big sense that we need to be promoting more regeneratively farmed, not just produce, but the practicalities and the principles and how we actually do it to more of our membership, Green Farm Collective membership, but also to the wider farming sort of audiences. So we have an annual conference, which we host, Mike hosts that at Church Farm, Boningale. This year we had 20 different speakers from all over the country.
Shropshire, isn't it? Shropshire?
Yes, in Shropshire, near Old Brighton. in Shropshire, so quite central. We had a livestock and an arable sort of series of seminars going, quite a few trade stands now building. I think we had nearly 30 exhibitors there this time. And the idea behind that is to give something back to our members, to look at new technology, new ideas, new thoughts, and make that easily and readily available to, as I say, not just our membership, but prospective new members, students as well, get a bit of discount ticket, and people that are keen on regeneratively farmed sort of produce and customers at the end of the day. So we enjoy running that. It's quite hard work, but it's a great day, actually. Very similar vibes to sort of Groundswell, when Groundswell started, sort of 6 or 7 years ago, I think. Quite small, quite intimate.
Yeah.
But actually an awful lot of really good conversations being had.
Let's turn towards communications, actually, because this is a big thing for you. And I remember being at the Guild of Ag Journalists lunch last year when you were awarded the Caroline Drummond Innovation and Communication Award, the first one of those. Yeah, just take a minute, everyone, to remember Caroline for a minute. What drives you to do this? I'm sort of looking back and thinking you're the son of 2 teachers, so this was going to come through naturally in some way, maybe. But it's a big part of what you do.
Yeah, it is. I really enjoy telling the story about farming. Actually, I think farmers probably haven't told the story well and often enough in my generation and maybe the generation before. I think people now are really interested and keen to hear about how their food is produced. But there's also an awful lot of misinformation that is very, very quickly moved around in social media circles and channels. And I think I feel that I have a voice to be able to correct some of those misinformations, not by getting into arguments. I would very often, 10 or 12 years ago, have some heated discussions about certain topics halfway through the night on various social media channels. I've learned now not to bother with that. But actually what we need to be doing is telling the positive stories about farming and how we do things. And actually, you can't be argued down then, because it's what you're doing. You're the owner of it. As long as it's honest and truthful, there is no comeback to that. I think children are hugely important as well. Children and their teachers, actually, about how the countryside happens, how food gets onto their plate, that it doesn't just appear in a supermarket or appear now on somebody's iPad and you dial in what you want and a man arrives at the door with it. That's how some children think food is produced. And we have a massive challenge as an industry as a whole to tell the story about how it actually happens. And there's some fantastic storytellers out there that are on social media channels who do it, I think, far better than I do. But we need everybody coming from different angles, different parts of the countryside, different farming systems, different crops, different livestock enterprises, and we all need to get involved, and we all need to shout about it. So things like Open Farm Sunday, brilliant day of farming explosion on social media. Everybody doing different things suited to their farm. Massive events like Michael Sly near Peterborough, or who's just welcomed his 100,000th visitor onto Open Farm Sunday days after I think he's done 17 years out of the 18. And an event like we had just 25 people around. We went on a farm walk, just literally a kilometre and a half around the buildings here, looking at different habitats, different crops, how we grow things, bit of machinery. So there's a scope for everybody to be involved in that as well.
Let's come back to Overbury and just think about the future. We talked about your first 10 years. We talked about the last 10 years. So what about the coming 10 years? What does that look like?
The golden globe of sort of crystal ball raising.
It's always fun.
It is. Yes, it is. I mean, I'm very positive. Yes, we've had a really difficult 15 months. And it's not, I say 15 months, it's probably 18 months now, actually. I'm looking outside, it's about 15 degrees. I still have my shorts on, but
Good.
every morning I'm sort of regretting putting them on, but I kind of stubbornly refuse to go back to trousers. It is the middle of June. We will have some challenges along the way. This last winter has been exceptionally difficult for everybody: man, woman, beast, infrastructure, the whole lot. It's been brutal, but it's also a taster of what's to come. So we need to gear up and we need to adapt to that. So we are gearing up. We have invested in another direct drill. So if anybody wants a very well looked after 6 meter cross slot drill, we are selling that. And if you tick the direct drilling options under SFI, if you've got about 300 hectares, you'll probably pay for that drill in 3 years. So it would be a very good buy for somebody. I'm probably not allowed to advertise on this
You could do it. It's fine. It's fine. Fine, Jake.
So we have increased our drilling capacity for this year. I think the windows are getting narrower, and we need to have more output. So that's quite a big change. We've also bought and had part funded actually by FIPL, so Farming in the Protected Landscape, we're part of the Cotswolds version, a compost turner. So we will be able to make our own compost now. We've been making it for a few years, but not under our complete control. So we hire in a contractor with a big terrogator. We blend it through there, and then we push it around with the JCB bucket, which has been fine, but it's not good enough. And we can make better compost, which will speed up, I think, our improvements in soil health and organic matter increments, enabling us to have bigger, wider, longer windows for operations. But it's a slow improvement, but one that we need to make. So that's a reasonable investment. And I do think that there will be opportunities for us because we are committed to farming. We are in it for the long haul. I think there will be opportunities where the other farmers may not wish to, invest in grain stores or invest in farm machinery, or actually take advantage of some of these SFI payments for the years that they're there, but might not have the skills or the ability to invest in the machinery needed necessarily. So I think there will be some opportunity for expanding some of our contracting operations, and opportunity, I think, with different red meat sectors as well. So opportunities ahead, challenges that come with all of those. And one you mentioned right at the very start will be labour, getting everybody skilled up to take some of these challenges on. And I think things like Groundswell and the Green Farm Collective conferences are a good ways to be able to help encourage and educate the team to take some of these challenges on. Things like land drainage is another thing. We're just investing in more and more land drainage at the moment. It's expensive, but we know we can't farm wet fields. We have to bite those bullets, and it's an investment for the next sort of 50 years.
Sounds like a very exciting and busy few years ahead. We're going to start to round things up. I could talk to you all day about everything you've got going on, but we are going to start to round things up. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really fantastic to just get a greater insight into your business and your farming journey, because I know that you've inspired a lot of people. We are going to have the quick questions, which are very quick and a bit of fun and nothing to do with farming. The first is your favourite food.
Lamb chops.
Nice.
Yeah, on the barbecue. Absolutely delicious.
Delicious. Favourite sport?
I'm going to cheat here because there are 3 involved in a triathlon. So
okay.
I like a bit of triathlon. So swimming and running would be my favourite of those 2. Cycling less so, but unfortunately you have to do all 3.
Yep, I was going to say. I always say I always want to do a triathlon as long as it's only the running bit that's included. And finally, your superpower. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Yeah, I'd like to time travel. I'd like to go back to see what Overbury was like, in the 1950s, 1940s, after the war, the land army. working. I think that would be incredible. And then the other thing would be to jump forward and see what it looks like, in 100 years' time.
I would like that as well. And the final questions, Jake, what is your message for the public?
Yes, that's it. I've sort of I know it's meant to be a quick fire round for the public message, but I think it's about thinking for yourself, and it's about not taking for face value some of the things that are easily shared on social media, and actually learn and be enthusiastic about where your food and the farmers that are growing that food, their commitment to what they're doing and in the landscape that they're doing it. So an opportunity like Open Farm Sunday, get out there and actually go and invest some of your own time in the food and in the landscape that we're all working in.
And your message for your fellow farmers?
Fellow farmers, it's about grasping the challenges that we have ahead of us, and it's about looking forward, adopting new technologies. They might be very different to the things that are traditional, but those traditional things are not always going to be working in the future. So we need to be more resilient, more open-minded, and start pushing on a little bit.
Great. We'll leave it there. Jake, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolute pleasure, Ben. Really enjoyed it. I can't believe that's an hour. It's just absolutely flown by. So really appreciate you having me on and challenging me and making me think actually a little bit about where we're going, where we've been. And it's been great. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for coming on. That's it for today. Huge thanks to my guest, Jake Freestone. Thank you also for listening. Please do share this episode wherever you can. Tell someone you know about the show. Don't forget also to check out our sister show, Rural Business Focus. You can find that wherever you're listening to this one. Next time, I'll have a special episode coming from Groundswell for you. But for now, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers, and thank you very much for listening.